Hello, everyone, and welcome to the final segment in a series featuring our friends from VikingsTerritory.com. I'm Tom Moore from VikeFans.com, and today we're pleased to welcome Lindsey Young to talk to you about the 2014 Minnesota Vikings offense. Lindsey, welcome to the Long Ship.
Thank you very much. I'm glad to be here.
Well, Lindsey, I expect to talk a lot of Viking offense with you, but before we do, I had to ask you a couple of non-football questions. So you ready for that challenge?
Definitely. Shoot.
All right. Well, because, I know you've done a lot of reporting on the Minnesota Timberwolves, so I have to ask you about that inevitable trade that was going to happen with Kevin Love being sent to the Cavaliers. My two questions are, did Minnesota get good value in that trade? And based on the moves, can long-suffering Wolves fans actually hope to go to a playoff anytime soon?
I think the Timberwolves definitely got a good value with the trade that they ended up pulling off. Honestly, I'm still not convinced on how Flip pulled that one off, but I think it's going to be great for the Timberwolves. Like you said, it was pretty inevitable, so it's always a bummer to lose the kind of talent that we lost with Kevin Love, but having these four guys all starting out together and all, kind of being able to build around each other and develop together as a team, I think is going to be amazing. Anthony Bennett is yet to be proven, so we'll see, but I think that Andrew Wiggins is the real deal, and I'm pumped to see that go through. As far as, the long-suffering Timberwolves fans, I can definitely relate to that, and they've been using the term rebuilding year for probably 5 or 6 seasons now, and it gets really old. But I think this is the first year that fans are on board with using that term and using it in a positive sense. We'll see what happens this year. There's a lot of new faces, a lot of new chemistry, but I absolutely think that the playoffs are in the very near future for the Timberwolves. If not this season, definitely by next season.
Well, Lindsey, is Ricky Rubio part of that rebuild?
I am a big Ricky Rubio fan, but he really has not proven himself to be the player that people thought he was going to be coming in from Spain. He once in a while has those awesome games, but he still struggles with the jump shot, and I know that he's going to be looking for that max deal, and I just don't know that he's worth it. So we'll have to see. It will be interesting to see how he plays with these new guys coming in, and I'm hoping that gives him a little bit of a bump to get things going.
Sounds good. Well, we'll look for more information for you as we get towards the fall, but I had to ask you kind of on a different note. I know you spend your time reporting on all these hardened athletes who seem to be able to ignore the pain and discomfort so they can perform on a daily basis, and you'd think some of that tough mentality would wear off on you, but I have to ask, what the heck happened with the ALS Ice Bucket challenge you got?
That was terrible. The Ice Bucket Challenge is awful. I begged my roommate to not nominate me. I knew that she had gotten nominated. I said, I have no problem with donating. It's a great cause. I've already donated. Just don't make me do the video. Obviously, that did not go as planned. She nominated me. I have to tell you that when I was going for it, all I was thinking was, everybody overreacts when this happens. It can't be that bad. And I was going for a calm, focused look, and it didn't pan out for me. It's really embarrassing.
Well, the good news for you is while you talk about this, understand behind the scenes, we will be showing that video, so they're going to see the face you made. But to make you feel better, Brian Robinson took that same challenge. I thought he was going to cry after he poured the water on himself. So you're not alone.
I did see it, and it was a good one. I have had multiple friends text me to tell me that they took a screenshot of my face on that video to use later. So, go ahead and show it. I think it's made its rounds.
Okay. Well, on a final note, I do at least want to support that you have a fighting spirit, and I have to congratulate you on a 38-pound weight loss since last November. And since most of us here on VikeFans.com are facing, a little bit of spirits and brews and some fattier foods as these upcoming tailgate parties start, can you give us some tips to drop a few pounds this fall without us having to resort to celery and rice cakes?
Sure. Definitely I went really intense with it, and I did see the results, but I found that things that made a huge difference were even being able to cut out sugars or cut out some of, the larger carb items. Just doing that, I saw a major difference. I still have fatty foods. I still eat cheese and yogurt and those types of things. Ranch dressing, I still have that, but just cutting out the carbs and the sugar, I honestly did not believe the difference that it made, and I don't think I'll be going back, so I have to go with that one.
Sounds good. Well, given that we're going to cut out carbs, we're at least going to tell the fans here on the site on game day, we're not putting beer in the category of carbs. Just count that as a protein.
Fair
You'll be
enough.
okay.
Fair enough.
Okay, Lindsey, now that we've got that housekeeping out of the way, let's talk some Viking offense. What do you say?
Sounds good. Absolutely.
Obviously, the best place to start is right at the quarterback position, and veteran Matt Castle held off rookie Teddy Bridgewater to claim that starting job. Now, Castle was pretty up and down last year, so what makes you think that with a few months under his belt in Norv Turner's offense, he's going to be ready to lead this team to consistent wins?
That's a good question. I put a lot of thought into it. I mean, if you would have asked me a few months ago, maybe even 2-3 months ago, who should be the starting quarterback, I probably would have not gone with Castle. I probably would have said, let's just go with Bridgewater. But you know what? Castle has looked great during the offseason. He's looked awesome in preseason games, and so I would agree with what the Vikings coaches are saying, that he's done nothing to lose that starting job. So I'm on board with that, but I am interested to see how things play out when the games count. He has been inconsistent in the past. You know, he had a great season with New England, but even with us, he's had strong games, and then he's had games where he just looks completely indecisive, and he looks like a rookie. So I'm hoping that with the combination of the new coaching scheme and working under Norm's offense, and then also just with really having that sense of competition, with having Bridgewater come in and perform really, really well, and actually feel like he's competing for that starting spot. I don't think Zimmer's the type of guy that will kind of go back and forth between quarterbacks, and I think Castle knows that. And so I'm hoping that that kind of lights the fire beneath his butt, if you will, to really perform well. And so far he is. He looks really sharp. He looks confident in the pocket. So we'll see how that pans out.
Well, you know, you talk about some rookie mistakes he makes sometimes, and, you know, we saw him when he got under pressure last year, it seemed like Matt will throw the ball up for grabs. And as fans, how concerned should we be about his ball security, or do you think Norv will keep that in check?
I think Norv will keep that in check. Of course, I mean, you can't do anything about being in the guy's actual mind when you're out on the field, and so that's what I'm interested to see, how he does under pressure. But I do think that just with Norm's experience and the way that he coaches his players, I think that it's going to be much improved. I saw him at training camp and just saw them running drills, and both Zimmer and Norv, even though Zimmer is the defensive guy, just individually talking to these guys and really building that confidence in them, I think will be a huge key.
Well, if it's not for any reason, you know, Matt gets the first crack at the job, but you saw Teddy Bridgewater in training camp and in the preseason. What were your overall impressions of his play, and where does he need to improve in order to be ready to take the leadership of this team?
Well, I think that Teddy is really much more ready to start and to play in the NFL than Ponder ever was. He just has this calm confidence about him that I think is important. When I saw him at training camp and things like that, just seeing him do interviews, seeing him talk with other players and run plays and stuff on the field, I just think he seems more mature than his age would suggest. And if I can go out on a limb and compare him to Johnny Manziel, which I know everybody is doing, they just couldn't be any more opposite. Bridgewater could care less about the hype and the media. He's here to play football and nothing more. And I think that's the biggest key for him. He looked really great in preseason, I thought, as far as a rookie coming in and playing his first times in the pros. But he has forced some passes that shouldn't have been thrown. And I think that's the biggest concern, is just those few plays during the preseason where he looked indecisive. He wasn't really sure which decision to make, or if he should make a pass or not. And I think, if anything, that will be the issue, is the playmaking decisions in the pocket. I'm not concerned about his accuracy. I'm not concerned about his athleticism, but just kind of that indecisiveness that we saw a few times, I think, would be the issue.
Well, you know, you talk about Ponder earlier. I mean, obviously the safety net was, you know, having the number one rusher in the league in Adrian Peterson, and that's what it's been really for the last 7 years. But under Norv Turner, is he still the primary weapon, and how do you see Adrian's role changing under Norv's offense?
You know, it'll be interesting to see. I mean, I don't think you can have Adrian Peterson on your team and not have him be a major weapon offensively. But he is, I don't know if I want to say over the hill. That seems a little too extreme, but he's getting older, and I don't think he can be the person that you build your offense around anymore. So I'm interested to see this year just how the receivers are utilized. I think Cordero is going to be obviously a huge part of our offense this year. I know that when Norv Turner came in, he said that he had already put Cordero in 10 plays in the playbook. So, you know, he's already been outspoken about wanting to utilize him. So I think that he'll be a major part. I don't know if you could say that he'll take some of the spotlight off Peterson. I don't know if that's true, but I definitely think that Norv is going to want to make this move into the Vikings having a better passing game than they have in the past couple seasons.
Yeah, well, obviously Peterson's been relatively healthy with the exception of the major knee injury that he had. But on Saturday, the Vikings released the number one rusher in the preseason, Joe Banyard. So I guess that makes Matt Asiata the primary backup for AP. Or really, in your opinion, should we expect maybe the explosive Jerick McKinnon to grow into that role this season?
Yeah, I've been talking with some of my friends that are Vikings fans just about the running back situation. We actually had talked about Joe Banyard, because he had such an explosive fourth game, but it was kind of one of those things that was too little too late. We have a lot of running backs on the roster. I think Matt Asiata looks fantastic. Definitely put him as the number 2 in there. But I think that Jerick McKinnon has a ton of potential. I was able to see him the few days that I was at training camp, and he seems to just really meld well with the other players. He definitely appears to be one of those players who he is really quiet, but he's just kind of sitting there and absorbing. I think he is excited to learn, excited to be here, and I think he's one of those guys who's going to be, moldable and adaptable to what we need him to be. So I think that if not this year, in the next season, really seeing him step up and becoming a major role player for the Vikings.
Obviously, that's the running game, but we are moving towards a passing, reliance in Norv's offense and maybe even the deep passing game. But our pass blocking has been a pretty big concern the last couple of years, especially at the tackle spots. And, due to his size, Phil Lodeholt, he's probably always going to struggle against speed rushers. But, Lindsey, what's happened to Matt Khalil? He looks lost in pass coverage this preseason.
Yeah, I'm asking the same question. Like, where did Matt Khalil go, and who is this guy on the line? It's sad. It makes me nervous. I think in the first 3 games, he allowed 2 sacks and 4 quarterback hurries, basically individually allowing those things. He gets beat every time. I was reading an article the other day on Bleacher Report, and they said that Khalil was grasping at ghosts, and that's exactly it. By the time he's going after his guy, he's already passed him. The thing that's interesting to me is how much Norv Turner has really defended Khalil and really said positive things about him, which is interesting. He said that he's not concerned and that Khalil has been improving each week. And my question is, I'm not sure if that's just Norv wanting to deflect any negative energy, if he's seeing things at practice that maybe we're not seeing. But I think it's a big concern if Khalil doesn't turn things around in the regular season.
Yeah, because, obviously, we may have problems there, but I'm not sure our line depth's going to help us a whole lot if it has to be somebody besides Khalil.
Right, yeah.
And, when I look over at the wide receiver position, Greg Jennings was pretty quiet in the preseason. Maybe that's expected because he's a veteran stature. But is he still the focal point of this receiver core, or is the torch being passed to Cordero Patterson?
I think that we can say that the torch is being passed a little to Cordero. I don't think that Jennings won't be utilized. As far as not seeing a lot of him in the preseason, I'm not too worried about that. I think him not getting much action is really no different than AP sitting out. Jennings is a proven veteran. The coaches know what he can do. I think there's no sense risking injuries. But that being said, I think there's also this mindset of, he's not going to be in the league a whole lot longer either. So I think we can expect to see him, but definitely the way things are moving is to Cordero being the number 1 receiver on the team. He's been able to learn under Jennings, play alongside of him, which I think is invaluable to have that kind of leadership. So in that sense, Jennings is a big asset to the team. But as far as actual plays and how he's being utilized, I really see Norv using Patterson more than Jennings this season. But we'll see if I'm wrong. That's just my gut feeling.
Well, speaking of Patterson, one of the things he needed improvement in was his route running and his ability to catch that ball away from his body so it didn't bounce off. From what you saw in training camp in the preseason, is he improving there?
I think it's improving, but, I still saw that happen a couple of times, and I'm just not sure what it's going to take to get over that. As far as natural ability, Patterson has it in the bag. He has the speed, agility, he has the vertical jump. But the technique does have room for improvement, and I'd still say that going into the regular season. I'm assuming that that's something that they'll be doing a lot of work on. He looked good in training camp, lots of route running and things like that looked clean, but there were a couple of those dropped balls, which is still concerning to me when you're the top receiver on the team.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll watch for that. And Lindsey, as we close out our conversation today, I have to put you on the spot. And these Vikings are coming off a 5-9-1 season, but with a new coaching staff, got a more aggressive mentality. Where do you peg their record for 2014?
I have been calling 9 and 7. I'm going to go with that. I know that that's quite a few more wins than ESPN the other day, I think, put them at 4, which I think that's way too low. I know I'm being optimistic, but I just think they look good. We do have a tough schedule, though. I mean, those first few games will be really interesting to see. Facing New England at home for our home opener, I'm interested to see how that goes. But I'm going to stick with 9 and 7, and we'll see how we end up.
Sounds good to us. We look at it this way. After 5-9-1, anything north of 7 wins is probably a good season.
Absolutely. I completely agree with you.
Well, Lindsey, we appreciate you helping us dissect the new Viking offense. And I want to encourage our fans to keep up with Lindsey's thoughts and stories on VikingsTerritory.com, as well as her Making the Call blog site. And you can also follow Lindsey on Twitter at LindseyMN Sports, and you can see that Ice Bucket Challenge video anytime you want there. And keep in mind, that's Lindsey with an E. So, Lindsey, again, thanks for joining us on VikeFans.com.
Thank you, Tom. It's been great.
You bet.